of all the things that become so frustrating with this industry, it's like, like I just want to like hit print on my copier, get a copy, get paid for that, move on. Like that's what I want. What do I have to give up to get the consistency so that if I can get into a point where I can choose whether I want to take on the more complicated, the more difficult. Welcome to another episode of Industry Insights with Mark and Liam. Extra special episode today. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be featuring our brand new VPG6, which Liam has just dubbed the workhorse, and it's a very apt name, and we're going to jump right into it. What I want to do is I want to start off with a conversation about a topic that comes up all the time, which is the white printhead and how on our machine it's offset and what that means. It has had much larger implications than we really originally gave it. It's been super fun to go on jobs and play with it. Liam, you are the wall printing guru, as we've dubbed you. Why don't you go ahead and just kind of show us on the head, when I say offset, just to kind of give us a rundown of that printhead, very high level. Let's keep it just sort of on the geometry.
Yeah, so one of the main differentiators with this machine is that, you can see we have our white head offset here. But what that means is the printer is always traveling in this direction. We've got it flipped around right now so we can look at the print heads. But when it's facing the wall, this white head is moving first. And so what that means is we can lay a full white undercoat before color ever comes in, because we always want to lay white down first.
The very basic stepping stone into white printing is the vast majority of what you're doing is underlayment, right? Why don't you explain what underlayment is and why you use it, how you would use it, and kind of go back to the printhead and explain what the ink flow is actually looking like.
I personally like to use white undercoat on everything. And that came from doing a lot of print jobs and realizing, okay, paint sheens are always a little bit different. Even if it's the exact same coat, it's a little bit different. But then paint colors will also affect how the ink goes down. And some of the reason for that with different sheens is that the ink droplets will beat up more on more glossy sheens. So you get a more faded look because the droplets aren't spreading out as much. So laying a white undercoat not only gives us great results on dark colored walls, it also gives us a lot more consistency, even just on white walls, because all paint is different.
This is going to be awesome to let our viewers kind of witness what it's like when you jump in with Liam, who goes 2 feet all the way to the bottom when he swims in a pool. It's like he's trying to see how long he can hold his breath for. All very correct and all very interesting. But Klauser, why don't you give us a basic overview of white undercoatment and then kind of basically translate what was Liam talking about there? Why don't you translate for someone who's learning about this for the first time?
Substrate matters. I think that's the most important thing to take away from any printing exercise, and specifically why white's important is that substrate matters, whether it's the substrate color or the substrate texture, or like Liam was saying, even differences in paint sheens will impact the way a print shows up on the wall. Now, this doesn't mean that the print's going to be ruined if you're printing on eggshell or gloss or what have you, but the colors can differ depending on paint sheen, paint brand, or if you're going from stucco to brick or drywall. So to eliminate those types of color variabilities, the best bet is to always lay a consistent substrate that you're printing on. That consistent substrate is white ink. So if you can put down a base of white ink first, then you know that when you put your color on, you're always going to be putting your color on the exact same substrate. That white ink is the first barrier to your thing that you're printing on, and your color remains consistent no matter what you're printing on.
Hold on a second. You mean to tell me that we're printing on printing?
We're printing on printing.
Is this the movie Inception? Like what exactly am I supposed to understand here? Yeah. So exactly right. Like the point is to deal with anything that's non-white that you're printing, because you're limited to CMYK, right? Anything you print on that's not white is going to have some sort of filter. It's going to wash out the color effectively.
The general consensus is that you use white on off-white walls. And what we're implying and indicating here, and how we've now been running our printers since the dawn of this offset G6 printhead, is that we put white ink down for almost everything, even if it is a white wall, because white wall to white wall, your consistency changes.
Whoa. That's crazy talk. You're doing white on white. Yeah. So it's inception on white on white. We're getting into the weeds here, but it actually comes down to very simple. A layman can appreciate it. All you really have to do is a side by side. What we're saying is when we print red, we're consistently printing the red we want is effectively what it's getting down to.
Yeah.
So when you're laying white, general principle is you have to lay white first and then print on the white. Yes. So Liam, go back to the printhead and explain, why is that offset so critical?
So the offset is so critical because even when we were using another machine before this, white was so important.
You can say wall pen.
Okay. when we were using the wall pen before this, and every other printer on the market does it the same way. They split the usage of the heads because white always needs to come first and the color on top of that.
I think actually there's a couple of the Epsons that do this as well. I think this is actually fairly common out of the Chinese machines. It's really just the wall pen that's everything's all aligned.
Okay, gotcha.
But we'll get on why the G6 is different, even against some of the other ones. But let's continue with the offset. So just looking at it, if it's going ahead, if it's not in line, it allows us to do what exactly? Why is that so critical?
It means we can print with the full white head. So like on the wall pen, it's splitting the usage of the heads. We're getting half the white head, half the color head, so we can lead with white. But what that means is you normally get half as much blending. So if you want the same amount of color blending as you had before, you're going to have to basically double the time that it takes to do that print. And we found white undercoat to be so crucial that I started just doubling the time for every print so that I could have more reliable prints. And as we were developing this machine, that became kind of something we were looking at, and we all looked at of, if we're going to be doing this anyway, how do we make it a regular speed? And even that, how do we make it faster?
Just again, to sort of translate for anybody who's not in the lingo with everything that's going here, basically when you split the heads, like on the wall pen or anything in line, you have to half the speed. So using white has a consequence of slowing everything down. When you offset it, we can run it at the same speed regardless of whether we're using white or not, which is a major advantage, right down to the point where we run white, even in circumstances where we otherwise wouldn't have bothered. We do it because it lets us get color preservation. So coming full circle, that's an insane benefit. Is the knowledge that we can use white on every job without having to compromise speed allows us to get much more consistent results. Yes, that's effectively what we're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's speed as it pertains to the geometry of the print heads. That's speed because the print heads are offset, but we also gain speed given the technology of the print head, the underlying technology of the Gen 6 as well.
Whatever do you mean, Klauser? Please, by all means, elaborate for us. Yeah.
So because laying white is such an important factor in printing, in wall printing, the idea is that you want to lay as much white as necessary to cover the wall. That generally means a full flood of ink out of a single print head. That's a lot. You're asking your print head to do a lot of printing very quickly. And depending on the type of print head you use, you're going to hit the limits of your print head. And so to combat that, what you do is you slow down. Give your printer more time to lay the white ink so that you get a consistent coat so that you can put your color on top. If you speed it up beyond the ability that your printhead can print, you're going to end up with color drops, nozzle drops, and a significantly inconsistent print. It's like it becomes very noticeable very quickly when you've outpaced your printhead.
So one of the big things that we are dealing with here is there's actually two different types of printing. It sounds to me like CMYK and white are two completely different beasts when it comes to how the ink flows and what you need out of your printhead in order to do it. So I think we got it now. I think we beat a dead horse on the offset. Liam, tell us, why is white different? Why is the ink consumption, when people ask us how much does it cost to print, how much ink am I going to need, how many bottles should I have? Tell me about your experience using this workhorse, the thing that basically spray paints white ink. Tell me a little bit about ink consumption and why volume is such a consideration with white ink.
Yeah, especially because we're always going through way more white ink than we are for color. Unless you are printing a solid black block, there's no way color keeps up with white ink. And even then, we're mixing all of our colors in black to get that black, so it's a little more forgiving. Whereas white needs a full coat as it goes, and that burns through a lot of white ink.
Why does it need a full coat?
Because we need that consistent substrate. We need it to be dense enough in those tiny droplets that we've created an entire substrate of white ink for our color to go on top of. I want to add to what Klauser was saying earlier too, which is if you're having a little bit of issue with magenta or a little bit of issue with yellow, it kind of depends on the color of the print, if that may show up in the print. But if you have an issue with white, it's going to show in everything. If your white is dropping out some, that's going to become very apparent no matter what color you're printing on top of it. So the reliability of white is hugely important.
The foundation of your print.
So there's no way to fake it. There's no way to cheat it. And if we were to look at everything else on the market right now, besides our spray paint can of white ink that we've got on the face of our head, what your guys are basically telling everybody is that you're going to have an issue where the best way to solve it is to slow everything down. And Klauser, you were alluding to this a little bit when you were talking about how much ink you're using, how you need more time for the ink to get out. Can you maybe talk about the G6? What makes it unique? Why does it allow for more ink to flow? Why don't we have to slow it down?
So when you're when you're printing something, you're selecting the amount of ink that you want to throw on the wall in your print settings. And depending on the speed in which your print head is traveling up and down the wall, your print head has to fire at a rate of, you know, 5,000 to 10,000 drops per second to get enough ink on the wall based on your speed. The faster your print head moves, the more you need your nozzles to fire, the faster you need your nozzles to fire. And if you fire faster than your print head can handle, you end up with a jam. Your system can't supply enough ink to the nozzles, and you end up with color drop. And so that, from a print head spec perspective, is the print head firing frequency. That's the thing that you're looking at when you're going into the weeds of print head specs. But that frequency is the frequency at which the nozzles can fire.
Anybody who's still hanging on to this conversation at this point, I'm sure is already well in the weeds with us. We're doing our best to translate this back to like, what does this mean real world? But basically, you got to have a big gun that shoots a lot of bullets. Otherwise, you're going to have areas where you're not hitting, essentially, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's you know, an automatic machine gun. Basically, it's able to fire consistently without getting jammed up or backlogged.
Okay,
that's what the G6. Why it's so impressive is that you are printing at essentially as fast as I would feel comfortable with the machine moving in most cases.
There is an upper limit to how fast you literally want the head going before you kill somebody if they get hit, right? So there's a reasonable, we don't want to launch this thing to the moon smell test that we're putting on it.
But small gains there. And I mean, like, and that's where the experience in wall printing, you know, what we're trying to communicate is that experience is small gains there makes such a big impact on total job scope. You know, if we're adding or increasing our speed by even 20 or 30%, like over the course of a larger project, that is hours and hours of times, in some cases days, that you've shaved off the project that allows you to mobilize to the next one and obviously scale your business.
That's interesting. Let's bring in some war stories here. Liam is our resident been everywhere, done everything wall printer. Liam, let's talk specifically about the ability to use white as an undercoat. Okay. We'll just leave speed as a extra commentary about how nice it was that you got to go home and see your wife and kids and weren't on site for 24 hours. But let's talk about it in terms of like, what does knowing that you're going to lay that white ink on every surface, tell me a little bit about how you approach jobs, knowing that that's the new thing with the G6 that we've started doing since we got it. Like, tell me about how you approach jobs differently.
Yeah, it seems so peaceful. I mean, I remember back in the day before I implemented with the wall pen having to do a white undercoat. We used to make sure we knew what kind of paint was on the wall. We would buy a sample of that paint a section of the wall, test on it, adjust our DPI, basically our ink saturation, to match and make sure we got good results. And it was a lot of the times a toss-up because many people don't know the paint that's on their wall. So you're taking your best guess and going to the job hoping the colors look good. But being able to use a white undercoat for everything means I can test on this wall and it doesn't matter what color, what sheen, what kind of paint is used on the client's wall. I know that result is going to look, you know, within like 98% of what I tested here on this wall. And that's just a lot of peace of mind going into a project that you can see a successful result here and know that that's going to translate into the job.
That's interesting leading into the project. What about when you're actually printing with white? Because I know the anxieties associated with like, am I going slow enough? Which is probably one of the worst feelings as an operator, is like, I have to make a call on whether or not I'm going to like push the upper limits of this thing or really just settle into the fact that this thing is going to be a 14-hour print. And neither decision that you make ever feels particularly good.
It all seems like little anxiety based, right? Like, so that's another one. Where, yeah, you're kind of taking your best guess. And if something goes wrong, you really don't have much, if any, warning when it goes wrong if you had a nozzle drop. And then it's not really that recoverable. So it's just a lot of peace of mind in the printing process, knowing how much white this thing can put out. Like, we are hardly ever running this thing at even 50% white ink output, which is crazy.
We're not even maxing out the capability of this thing. We've actually had to dial it back. It's like our car is too fast. We want to avoid speeding tickets, is what you're telling me. It's like, it's just too fun.
Yeah.
Let's dial this thing back. All right, Liam. Well, tell me about that job you had where you told me, I believe you promised me that you clean the wall, right? That's a question that comes up all the time.
Oh my
what kind of prep do we need to do? And I remember some very big promises from you that you had immaculate. It was clean. You swore on it. What happened? Tell us about cleaning the wall. It comes up all the time. It's an interesting question, right? Because a lot of it's behavior. Like, how much do you care about quality? I myself don't care at all. So I always print on the dirtiest walls and just live with it. So people ask me and I don't give them very good advice because I'm like, it's fine. It's just, I have a messy room and there you go. That's what it is.
And that's why Mark has me do the printing. Yeah.
Yeah. If you guys are wondering how we arranged this whole situation, I think it's pretty telling here. Liam, tell us about cleaning the wall and how that's factored in. You know, how do you approach a job when you say, do I need to clean the wall? Is there any prep? Tell us a little bit about that and then what white does, how that changes it.
The project you're talking about was the project that was the turning point for me, where I made a decisive decision halfway through that project that said, I'm white ink undercoating everything from here on out.
Even though it slows it down, requires more volume, is trickier, this problem came up on site and you were determined to lean into white ink as your best friend because this problem was so difficult. I got to hear it. What is it?
Yeah, I voluntarily took twice as long for the second half of the project because I was running into so many issues.
Pre G6 days.
Pre G6. To be clear, this is all this is all wall pen days that we were dealing with this. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were printing, and it became pretty apparent through the first and second prints that people had been leaning up against the wall and talking to accounting after eating a cheeseburger or coming back from a job site or something, and having the greasiest handprints you could imagine. And similar to the way we talked about sheen, if you have a really glossy sheen, it makes the ink droplet speed up a little more. If you have oil on the surface, it does the same thing. So if you're just printing in CMYK, you get a really faded section right where that grease was. So it looks like you built it into the design, that there's a really faded handprint that's clearly a handprint. I mean, you can even see the fingerprints in it.
I mean, you saw this big handprint on the wall before you printed. Why didn't you clean it?
No, it's invisible. And a lot of the time...
You keep saying that to me. I feel like this was just negligence is what this was. No, in all seriousness, this is the kind of thing that's a problem. Mark, you remember some of our very, very early prints. Do you remember that one we did in Calgary for Mogan Smed with Falk Built? And do you remember the water staining?
Yeah,
coming off the
definitely.
roof. You couldn't see it, but it was like it was like icicles were built into our image of like it had just done, and it was completely impossible to see. Not that we would have been able to do much because it was so high up, but you couldn't see it before we printed. We printed it. It is like people kept asking us what happened up there. I'm like, well, you have a leak in your roof.
These were the days before white ink even existed in the wall printing.
Yeah.
So the only option there was to paint the wall, which we ended up doing for a portion of it. But yeah, I mean, that takes us back to, like, again, substrate matters. You got to think about this technology in the wide format space. You know, your standard commercial print shop, they are printing on, you know, clean rolls of film, vinyl film. So that those environments are controlled. And when you're on site, everything that we've been doing, working towards making this, you know, operationally feasible, is kind of eliminate those variables. And so one of the variables we hadn't considered, and is one that's across the printing world, well, even if you're in a print shop, is fingerprints. Like getting your fingers on and the grease of your fingers can impact printing no matter where you're printing. And so this is a big one that needs to get addressed. And Liam felt the pain of that in real world. Sorry, continue, Liam.
Wait, hold on. Let me jump in here because Liam, I've heard other excuses brought up at other various times from various on-site people about even when you clean it, there's still issues.
You're talking about me too. But yeah, so like
almost exclusively, actually, for being honest.
If he says the word excuses, it came from me. Yeah. So even trying to clean with things like diluted simple green, we tried all kinds of different things.
Microfiber cloths.
And while that did take care of some of the grease stains, a lot of the time it was, you know, no matter how well you tried to do it, even if I cleaned with a light amount of simple green, went back, rinsed that cloth, cleaned with a light amount of water, went back, dried it off, got a clean one, and used a dry cloth. Still resulted in some streaking a lot of the time where you're just moving that grease around the wall. And because it's like impossible to see before you start, it's impossible to see how much you're spreading it before the wall is clean. Now, maybe if I had sat there for 2 hours cleaning it repeatedly, I could have taken care of it, but there's just no
what I thought you should have done.
Tell.
Like, you don't need to sleep as far as I'm concerned. So that was,
fair.
You can imagine my response on the other end of this line, but yeah, no, I mean, that's interesting. It's like, it is one of those things. I think what we have to basically conclude for anybody doing this. And I think if you go and ping the wall pen community, this is actually a pretty widely accepted practice. And one that we always pushed is like paint the wall. Like paint the wall first. Be sure. I mean, Klauser, one more time for the people in the back that didn't quite hear you about substrates. Does it matter or doesn't it matter?
Yeah, substrates matter. Yeah,
we're gonna get you a T-shirt that says "Substrates Matter."
Yeah, it's that or what Liam did, right? You double your project time. Which again, it's like anybody who's been in this space long enough to heard our teachings. This new way of printing has kind of shifted our paradigm from by any means necessary. right? The early days in this industry was a by any means necessary approach. You print the wall, you slow your printer down. Like, the goal is to get this technology out in front of the masses, because that is what's going to tip the scales in terms of opportunity and the advantage of getting involved here. We've overcome that. We've overcome all of the by any means necessary operations and instituted all of the solutions that, you know, can be instituted. And it eventually got to a point, it's like, well, there's clearly enough demand for these services. We've got to find a scalable solution. And that was really what drove this whole, you know, movement into new printhead technologies and offsets and all of these things. And so everything that we do now is about scale. So you can do it the alternative way. We ran a successful print business, and there are ways to do it, but scaling at that rate with those types of strategies in place is damn near impossible. Like, it's very difficult.
Massively impractical for sure.
Yeah.
I would say scalability seemed like the biggest keyword we had in kind of developing this. You know, it came to a point where it was like, okay, at what point do you need 2 or 3 machines, and how many more problems does that introduce? Versus, what if we could be more reliable and be faster?
Well, I think the first point was really what drove everything. I think if anybody who's spent any time in this space, and we have some very experienced operators out there, the feeling that you can't just follow a step by step and be sure of the result, that there's like so many variables and so many nuances. I mean, Liam, you did everything right. This is your Christmas present, so take it home with you. But like, you did everything right on that job site, right? When it came to printing, and you ended up with a handprint, something you couldn't see, couldn't reasonably expect. And even if you had tried to clean it, probably would have put other things. Like, of all the things that become so frustrating with this industry, it's like, like, I just want to like hit print on my copier, get a copy, get paid for that, move on. Like, that's what I want. What do I have to give up to get the consistency, so that if I can get into a point where I can choose whether I want to take on the more complicated, the more difficult than this. And if you look at the driving force of this, it's very, very interesting to me that, like, in the process of developing this technology, we created significantly more reliability than we even originally set out to do. I mean, we'll go into a whole separate conversation about the negative ink system, what all that consistent flow, consistent temperature, what that's done for us on reliability. We'll save that for another episode of like that pressurized ink system could not be better suited for what we're talking about than that. But just the fact that we can print on a substrate and know that, like, by laying down the right amount of white ink and hitting go without compromising speed, we could do it for every job, which means we took a variable that like sneak attacks you, right? It's like the Pearl Harbor of problems. Like, you didn't even see it coming. It's like everything could be right, and you're so focused on all these things, and then completely destroys it. It's not like you miss a big handprint. Like, the average user is going to see those defects. I think if I was going to get really deep into why this is such a problem, you have to, like, everything has to be articulated on whether or not the client sees it. Right. It has to be whether or not this is something that the client's going to notice and something you have to deal with is first and foremost the problems you can't have. Right. And the problem with this one, without using white ink or painting first, there are problems the customer is potentially going to see, and very likely will see, that it's hard to skip. It's hard. There's no way to like fix it. Basically, you're talking about a redo, which at the very least, the good news is if you redo it, you're painting it. So you can be sure it won't happen twice. Right. But it does kind of present a big challenge of like all the variables you're trying to take off the board. Mark, to your point, just trying to get like simple, reliable execution of jobs where you don't have to worry about it. This has been the most surprising for me, has been when you came to me and you said, we're just going to run white on everything. We're not, the only thing we're paying is a little bit more for ink, but we take all this other problem out of the equation. It's like, absolutely do it. If nothing else, the G6 was worth that alone. That was worth developing this technology. Yeah.
And it's probably worth putting some numbers to it. I mean, that project was what, just over $10,000?
Just under. 9,800, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So just under 10,000. Liam, you were on site for 3 days?
3 or 4 days. Yeah.
4 days. Okay. And late nights because of the rework and all of that. If you were to have gone in, so just as an aside, like, not a bad payday for a 4-day job. So again,
right. Yeah, absolutely.
Doable, but like your nerves were shot. Like you weren't hopping up and getting ready to go to the next one after that one. Like, I think there was a time you needed to kind of decompress and like, regain your thought on what has to happen next, and knowing that every job after that is going to take twice as long. Going into it, if you did it with the VPG6, how long do you think it would take you? Half the time?
Lost Mark there. He's lost internet connection. So we're going to finish this one off. So Liam, it looks like as we go through the VPG6, what we're really going to be working on, especially on industry insights for the next little while, as like a holiday advent calendar, kind of explaining it. What we really want to do and why you're so invaluable to the team is like, what was it like on site? What do these technological advances mean for a guy who's actually printing? And of all the things we've set out to do, we are trying to create the best operators with the most profitable business. That's always for us. It's not really about the tech. It's what the tech is doing for you. Right. So it sounds to me like if we were to evaluate this on the scale of important priorities, this is top three. Opens up significant opportunities for anybody who's running a business, especially at the enterprise level where you're doing multiple prints, 5-6 figure scale jobs. It sounds like the offset of the head is like, could you ever go back now that you have this? I mean,
No, there's not a chance, man.
you're never going to be able to go back. You're like, this is how I think of printing with white underlay. Everything I do is that.
Well, and I would say too, it's not just a doubling in speed with a white undercoat, because some of these jobs, when you're running it a lot slower on other machines, might take 14 hours to do a print. So when a print is 4 hours on this, let's say like an 8-hour print versus a 4-hour print, I can't really do two 8-hour prints in a day unless I can stay incredibly late and maybe that's my only print day. But if it's a 4-hour print, I can do three of those a day. And so I'm effectively tripling depending on the print size. It just has a huge impact when you get into these larger scale jobs where you're doing multiple prints every day for multiple days in a row, to where you might be home 3 times faster instead of just 2 times faster.
Let's that's all absolutely completely true. And like all these little things we're pointing out contribute to the larger picture, which is speed and scalability. Like why are those so different? So let's park that conversation for now. We'll do a whole separate episode with you about like when you had that 6-day print, why scaling was so crucial and why the speed was so important and how it generally affects your ability to go to jobs. But appreciate you, man, with this whole thing. You guys click the link below. We've got information on how you can get involved with the VPG6. We've got machines coming in. We're super excited. This is the workhorse of the industry. You're going to see everything
really
shift
is.
over to this system once people see what we can do. And we'll be posting some content on it in action, why it's so crucial. And more than anything, if you're interested, we'd love to host you. Come down to Asheville, North Carolina, come to our shop. You can work with Liam, get hands-on. We can show you everything that we do and kind of give you the industry insights that you're looking for. So until then, click that link below and we'll see you next time.